Welcome to this deep dive. We're about to get into the world of sheep and goat meat in India.
Yeah, it's a fascinating sector. A lot of folks don't realize how important it is to India's rural economy.
It really is. We're talking millions of farmers, especially in areas where, traditional farming's a real challenge. Sheep and goats are a lifeline.
That's right, and that's what makes this document we're diving into so interesting. It's from the National Meat Research Institute, and it really digs into how to bring this traditional sector into the 21st century.
So we're talking about bringing those classic images of, shepherds and their flocks into the age of technology and globalization.
Exactly, and the document doesn't shy away from the big issues. Low productivity, fragmented markets, all those hurdles the industry faces.
Right, and it's all happening against the backdrop of this huge population that needs to be fed.
Exactly. That's where this idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat comes in a self-reliant India. This document really emphasizes how to make that vision a reality for this sector.
And to give people a sense of scale here, we're talking over 220 million sheep and goats in India. So it's not just some niche market.
Not at all. These animals are vital, especially for those tougher agricultural regions we were talking about. It's about livelihoods, food security, the whole picture.
And speaking of the whole picture, this document goes way beyond just the numbers. I mean, it gets into the nitty-gritty of why India isn't producing as much meat per animal as other countries.
Right. You'd think with all the diversity in their breeds, hundreds of them, India would be a global leader. But there are some key things holding it back.
Yeah, and the document lays those challenges out pretty clearly. Small flock sizes, a lack of focused breeding programs, even the way traditional herding patterns are changing, it all adds up.
And those things, they have these ripple effects, you see. We're not just talking about, oh, maybe India could sell a bit more meat. We're talking food security for a nation with a booming population. We're talking environmental sustainability in a world where resources are getting stretched thinner and thinner.
It's incredible how something as seemingly basic as, like, how much meat can we get from this goat can be tied to these huge global issues.
That's the thing, it's all connected. And that's why this deep dive is going to be so interesting. We're going to unravel that web of connections, look at the challenges, but also the opportunities.
From what I've seen, there's some really innovative stuff happening in this industry.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking cutting-edge technology being applied in some surprising ways. I mean, imagine a farmer out in a remote village using a mobile app to analyze his flock's genetics and make breeding decisions. That's happening.
That's wild. From ancient herding traditions to high-tech solutions, it sounds like the future of this industry is going to be fascinating.
No doubt about it. And we're going to break it all down for you step by step right here in this deep dive.
All right, so let's dive into this whole value chain thing. And I guess the logical place to start is with breeding, right?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
So India, they've got this incredible variety of sheep and goat breeds, right? Each one with its own special traits. But when you actually look at the numbers, India isn't getting nearly as much meat per animal as some other countries.
It's kind of like, you've got this amazing spice rack with every spice you can imagine, but then you only ever use salt, pepper, and maybe cumin.
I see. So it's not that the potential isn't there.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. It's more that it's not being fully utilized. You've got some areas where inbreeding is holding things back, or maybe farmers aren't using those really high genetic potential male animals for breeding as much as they could.
So how do you fix that? How do you unlock that potential?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because the document talks about using technology to actually help farmers, even small-scale farmers, make smarter breeding decisions.
Okay, so giving goats DNA tests?
It's actually not that far off. They're developing these mobile apps the farmers can use to analyze their flock's genetics. The farmer could literally be out in a remote village and they can get this data that tells them, okay, if you breed this animal with this one, you've got a much higher chance of getting offspring that grow faster and produce more meat.
So they could, double their meat yield just by making smarter breeding choices? That's amazing.
Potentially, yeah. And think about what that means for their income.
That's huge. Okay, so we've got healthier, meatier goats. What are we feeding them?
Now you're getting to a really crucial point. Because you know that image we all have of goats just happily munching on anything in sight?
Right, they'll eat anything.
It's not quite that simple,
Right.
especially not anymore. Grazing land, it's becoming scarcer. Traditional grazing patterns are changing, and all of that has a real impact on productivity.
Right, because a hungry goat isn't exactly going to put on a lot of weight.
Exactly. It's all connected. So the document It really emphasizes this need to move beyond traditional grazing alone.
Okay, so if not just letting them graze, then what?
We're talking about supplementing their diet, more nutritious fodder, finding ways to use those crop residues that farmers often just, discard.
Oh, right, like turning what would be waste into feed.
Exactly. And they even talk about things like using locally sourced algae as a protein supplement. Some really innovative ideas out there.
So it's all about like working with the environment, not just taking from it.
Absolutely. Creating a more sustainable system for the animals and for the people.
Speaking of sustainability, you know what really caught my eye in this document? This whole One Health thing.
Ah, yeah, One Health. It's a fascinating concept. It's about recognizing how interconnected human health, animal health, and environmental health really are.
Like, what does that mean in practice, though, in this industry?
Well, imagine this. You have a program that goes out and vaccinates goats against parasites.
Yeah.
Pretty standard,
It
right?
keeps the animals healthy.
Right. But now, because those goats are healthier, they're less likely to spread those parasites to humans.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a win-win. Healthier goats, healthier people.
Exactly. And it's not just about parasites. It's about understanding how everything is connected and how interventions in one area can have these ripple effects throughout the whole system.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Okay, so we've bred these healthier, meatier goats. We're feeding them better. We're taking this One Health approach. Next step, I guess, is getting all that delicious, ethically produced meat to the people who are going to eat it, which, in a country as big and diverse as India.
Yeah, that's where things get even more interesting, don't they?
Yeah, it's an understatement.
Yeah.
Big and diverse is a good way to put it. So how do we even begin to tackle that last part of the puzzle, getting the meat to people's plates?
Well, that's where this document really, it really gets into the nitty-gritty of the industry.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sugarcoat things.
Yeah, this was the part that really surprised me, to be honest. I mean, I knew there were challenges, but I didn't realize.
It's easy to forget about that whole journey the meat takes after it leaves the farm, but it's a huge part of the equation.
Absolutely. And this document, it really digs into those often overlooked aspects. Like, I was struck by the stuff about inadequate infrastructure in processing plants.
Right. If you don't have those facilities, or if they're not up to par, it impacts everything.
Exactly. And then there are the animal welfare concerns during transport, making sure the animals are treated humanely throughout the process.
Which ties directly into the whole One Health idea we were talking about.
It all comes full circle, doesn't it? And then there's the whole issue of byproducts. Apparently, there's a lot of potential there that's being wasted.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about things like skin, bones, organs.
Right, stuff that often just gets discarded.
Which is a shame because those byproducts, they can be incredibly valuable if they're handled properly. The document talked about turning them into things like pet food, fertilizer, even collagen for cosmetics.
Wow, I had no idea. So it's like turning what we consider waste into valuable resources.
Exactly. It's about creating a more circular economy within the meat industry itself.
Mm-hmm.
Less waste, more efficiency.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but what about solutions? What did the document have to say about actually improving this part of the value chain?
Well, one thing they emphasized was the need for more mobile veterinary units.
Mobile vets to help with processing.
Exactly. Units that are equipped to handle everything from slaughter to basic processing, and they can travel to farms in remote areas.
That's brilliant. It brings the services to the farmers instead of the other way around.
Exactly. And it means the animals don't have to be transported long distances, which is better for their welfare and reduces stress.
It's a win-win. And what about those processing plants we were talking about? Any suggestions for improving those?
Oh, yeah. They went into quite a bit of detail about modern abattoir design. Things like proper drainage, hygienic handling practices, strict temperature control, all crucial for food safety.
Food safety is obviously a huge concern. No one wants to get sick from eating contaminated meat.
Exactly. And it's not just about preventing illness. It's also about maintaining consumer confidence in the industry.
Right, because if people don't trust the safety of the meat, they're less likely to buy it.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness we keep talking about.
It really does. Okay, so we've got the meat processed, it's safe, it's ready to go. Final hurdle, actually getting it into the hands of consumers. And this is where I imagine things get really interesting in India.
You're telling me. You've got this incredible diversity of markets. On one hand, you have those traditional wet markets, which are so deeply ingrained in the culture.
Right, it's not just about buying meat, it's a whole social experience.
Exactly. But then, at the same time, you have this huge rise in e-commerce. People ordering groceries online including meat. So how do you balance those two things?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mhm.
How do you modernize without losing that traditional aspect?
That's what the document grapples with. And there are no easy answers. But one thing they emphasize is consumer education
Education about what?
about the benefits of things like chilled meat, about safe handling practices, about the importance of sourcing meat from reputable suppliers.
So it's about empowering consumers to make informed choices.
Exactly. And if consumers start demanding higher standards, it will push the industry as a whole to improve.
Makes sense. This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about a sector I really knew very little about.
It's been a pleasure exploring it with you.
And for our listeners, if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to check out the original document from the National Meat Research Institute. It's packed with even more insights than we had time to cover today.
And who knows, maybe it'll inspire some of you to get involved in this growing sector. There's a lot of potential out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of sheep and goat meat in India. Until next time.